Perfect. All right. Thanks again, Brooke. Good morning and afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from. As Brooke mentioned, my name is Kyle Gray. I'm the manager of the Security and Fraud Department here at GSI. I've been working in security a little over 6 years now. Yep, solely with security. So enjoying what I'm doing, and I'm just trying to share some of the knowledge out there. So today we're going to be talking about JDE Security Best Practices. Are you secure and compliant? We're going to look at some high-level. Let's change that over. There we go. There's our agenda. We're going to look at some of the security best practices. There are quite a few. We're going to trim them down and bullet point. I think we're looking at maybe 5 or 6 of the main ones. We're going to look at some of the security 101, so high-level aspects of security and some of the foundational stuff. We'll take a look at some different security models, so an open versus closed, what those look like, how those are implemented, what the records look like, and what the difference between the two are. We're going to do the same for the role model, so process-based versus job-based. Same thing, we're going to analyze the two, look at some pros and cons, and we're going to figure out where everyone stands in their current security model. And then once we've gathered some of this security and model knowledge, best practice knowledge, we're going to look at what can you do? What can you and your organization do to either fix or at least begin addressing any potential issues that may come out of this. All right, there are 2 polls in this presentation. This one is kind of a beforehand, as we're going to kick it off before I get into all the material. Do you think your system is industry compliant regarding security setup? So Brooke, if you can launch that poll if you haven't already, that'd be great. We'll give about 20 to 30 seconds here. I just wanted, if you don't know, I don't know is an answer, and that's okay. But I want to know where we stand. Even if you are in a closed model, that does not necessarily mean you're meeting all of the other industry standards. Just looking to see if you are, in your view, compliant. As I said, we'll give it about 20, 30 seconds. Brooke, if it ends quicker than that, feel free to end it. And then if you can share the results with me, that'd be great.
Yeah, we've got about 2 more people that need to vote.
Okay.
All right, perfect. So we've got 73% of people saying yes and 27% saying I don't know, and we got 0% for no.
Okay, well, it's good that everyone thinks that they at least are not compliant. So, perfect. There's the end of results. Great. So 73% say or believe that we are, or that you are compliant. So good. We'll move forward. Hopefully, you may learn an aspect that to check. You may learn something that you need to just dot those I's, cross those T's, and make sure that is for sure yes. So moving on. Security best practices. Industry best practices. The first one and foremost, the most important, the one that auditors look at the most is, are you operating a closed security model? Notice I don't ask, are you operating an open one? I'm asking, are you operating a closed one? That's industry best standards, operating closed model. Why? We'll get into some more of the whys later, but overall, and again, these are high level, you get the accountability for all your applications and UBEs or reports in your system. You know that if you're in a closed model, you have to grant someone access they're not getting or inheriting access from somewhere else or from not having a closed model. Second, utilize process-based roles, not job-based. More streamlined, process-based roles are more streamlined and maintainable or manageable for your IT and business. It's a more manageable role structure. Again, I don't want to give too much away here. It's kind of why I balked there. We'll get into more detail. Only grant your users access they need. That is a best practice standard. We shouldn't just be taking, I hope that everyone has at least a change control or some sort of process in place where there's validation for roles when they're requested. It's not just a blind request. Oh, okay, yeah, that should be fine. We'll add that access. Well, do we know what we're adding? Do we know what we're causing potentially by adding this? So have an understanding, be aware of what you grant your users. If you aren't sure or can't tell or aren't in the position to be aware, well, then most likely you have some issues or some gaps with your current security model. Fourth one, process-based driven task view. You've seen I've used that word process-based a bunch. You're going to hear it some more, and we're going to look at it more in depth. It goes hand in hand with those process-based roles. Design the menu so that, or your task view, so that it can control the rest of security. I'll talk about that more later. And then reporting capabilities. I mean, there are best practices out there. It's hard to have a reporting schedule or methodology or plan without a third-party tool, but it's not technically impossible. There are custom reports that can be designed, developed, and also there are auditors that will take exports of data or VLOOKUP data as long as you provide the raw data as well. So it can suffice, and those technically are even though it's a data extract, those do suffice as reporting tools. So having reporting capabilities is a big kind of overseer behind your whole security model. If you've got some of the other stuff, but you have no idea how to report, what to report, or even what you're reporting on, or when you get the report, you don't know what you're looking at, well, again, there could be some gaps or something in your security model. Again, be in a position to send data via report or data extracts to auditors with confidence. And this goes whether publicly traded or private. Obviously, if you're publicly, you have to adhere to a different set of rules, SOX standards, those sorts of things. Private companies do not have to, although they really should. And if you think about it, if they're not regulated or required to adhere to some of those standards that publicly traded companies are, well, in my security eyes, I feel that private companies are more at risk because one, most of them don't at that point. But quick look at our security best practices here, again, from a high level and what we consider the main best practices. Jumping right into our security 101. So again, our high level, we're going to take a look at, we're going to define security, look at the security hierarchy, talk about it, how it works, and then we're going to go through a few of the 5, or what we consider 5 of the main security types, 1 through 5, ironically, but we will go at them in different order. And we'll describe and show kind of how those work and what they mean. So what is JDE security? Definition-wise is the use of application UBEs, reports, and data to grant your user base JDE access. Security enables an administrator to control access for individual users or for groups of users. Setting up security correctly ensures that users in the system have permission to perform only those actions that are essential to complete their job or their duty in the software. And security can be applied at the user, role, or star public level for any application, UBE, or table in the system. Take a little bit more of a look here shortly. All right, so I mentioned something about security hierarchy. I would assume that if we had 75-ish% saying that they were in compliance, that they are knowing, or they know anyway of or have heard of security hierarchy. If you have or haven't, this is the breakdown of the hierarchy. When a user is in the system, so they've logged in and they are either going to their favorites, they're going to the fast path, or they're going to the menu structure, they're going to eventually click on an application or a UBE to open it. At that time, the security hierarchy check clicks in. Top of our pyramid here is the user. Anything assigned at the user level will be picked up first. Anything and nothing found at the user level, it moves down to the role level. As you can see, there's 2 roles here, one with a sequence number of 20 and one with a sequence number of 10. Sequence number does come into effect, especially when coming to check security in the hierarchy. I'll get a little bit more into the role sequencing issues in a minute. If nothing is found at the user or roles level, then it will look at star public. If it finds nothing in our pyramid here, nothing at the user, nothing at any of the 5, 8, 20 roles assigned to the user, and no security, which there should be, we'll get into in a minute in a closed system, no specific security at star public, you'll get an error saying you're not authorized to access this application. So that is basically, and maybe some of these users that are on the call, IT folks, whatever it may be, I'm sure you ran into that before. If you didn't know how that comes about, or where, the methodology behind getting that particular error, here it is. I mentioned something about role sequencing issues. So I'm not going to get too far into this because it's not something we're covering. If we covered all of security, we'd be here for a long, long, long time, but not 30 to 40 minutes. you know, you can have roles, and this happens in a best practice model. It should not happen, or will not happen. But over time, and especially in a job-based model, you have roles that have different levels of access for the same application. So for instance, PO411 voucher entry. One role may say, yes, you have access to it. One role says, no, you do not have access to it. Explicitly in the role, their security records say yes, and one role says no. The no is role sequence 20. The yes is role sequence 10. So again, going down our hierarchy, check here, if there are no records at the user level for PO411, and the user is trying to click on it, the secure hierarchy is then going to go down to the role level. If it's going to find it at role 20, just like I mentioned, there's PO411, run no. The user at that point is going to not have access to PO411. The secure hierarchy check stops as soon as it finds a record. It does not continue going. So just because, and this is where some administrators and IT folks may get into some trouble or have issues where, and it's role sequencing issues, where they've got a role and they can prove and they can see that they've got a role that the user has yes to. They should have access to PO411. Why are they not getting it? This is why. And without a more streamlined role model, which we'll talk about, or a third-party tool such as All Out Security or QSoft, you're unable to solve this in an easy way. I won't even get into the methods to solve it. Again, if experienced role sequencing issues, then you absolutely know what I'm talking about. But they can be a nightmare, and changing role sequencing issues or fixing role sequencing issues can become a process where you're chasing your tail very badly. Moving on. All right, so here I mentioned we're going to get into 5 security types that we consider the best. Well, they are best practice, but we'll talk about the best practice behind them. But we need to talk a little bit about security. We need to understand security and what some of these main types of security are. So, type 3 application security. In essence, this is a security that says, can your users click on and enter the JDE application or report on the menu, FastPath, or favorites? You can sometimes, if you're able to click on it or FastPath to it and you get an error, that means you do not have security to it. You would need type 3 security, application security, to access or get into the application. So again, or if you look down here at our example, I've got a role, I've filtered on a role 04 voucher entry. I'm filtered on security type 3 because it'll mix 1s and 3s and everything in here, so we don't need to see all that. It is granted by these 2 flags right here, run and install. If there's a no, you do not have access to it. If it's a yes, you do. It's as simple as that, minus the little role sequencing issues we talked about. In simple form, again, application security is, can I access the report or application via the menu, FastPath, or favorites? If there's no security, you will get the error. And you can see, as I mentioned before, our numbers are going to jumble around. Application security is 3. In my mind, they might have done it backwards. We probably should have called that 1 because that's kind of the first step. Action security right here is type 1, but if you can't get into the application, then you can't have action security. But that's besides the point. It is type 1 action security. And this, in essence, means what can your users do once they enter an application? So you have application security where it says, all right, I can get into it, but now it looks at the action security and it goes to the hierarchy check again. And it says, what permissions do I give this user once they're inside PO411? So as you can see down here, screenshot again, filtered on voucher entry. The 4th line is 0411. And you can see that for this example anyway, we've granted them full access. They have add, change, delete, okay, copy, scroll. It's as simple as that. Again, if these records are not there and the hierarchy goes to check and there's nothing out there, it's going to defer to, if there's a star public, I don't want to get ahead of myself, we're talking, but you will have basically inquiry only access. You will not be able to add, change, delete, or copy within that if you don't have explicit yeses. Jumping around again, type 5 is data selection and processing option security. So, and this only deals with UBEs or reports. UBE is a universal batch engine, and that is just another, or is that is an Oracle word for report. So any R object in the system. So once in a UBE, can your users change the data selection and processing options that the UBE looks at and produces? So another screenshot down here. I did use a different role. Look at the last two lines. Again, there's not anything set up for our applications here. This is only for our Rs, our reports or UBEs. So you can see that there are 6 types of data selection and processing option type 5 security values. Prompt for values, which is your processing options. You would hope it'd say prompt for processing options, but it doesn't. Prompt for versions. So if you have multiple versions of these UBEs and you don't control versions on your task view, you can set it up to prompt for versions so that when they click on R01050, they're going to, the first screen that comes up, it says you need to, before you even get to the rest of the data selection, you need to choose a version of this UBE that you want to run. Moving forward, you can give them or deny them the ability to prompt for data selection. So this has nothing to do with changing. It says, are they even going to get to see the data selection? Or are they just running it without even knowing what they're running? Do they have full access and ability to modify this data selection? So we give them access to it. Can they modify what's been predefined in there? Can they change it? Can they change what the report is going to run on? Add data selection is, there's already some data selection and processing options set up for the UBE or the report to run. Are we allowing them to add any criteria or data selection to this report? So you have the flexibility to grant mixed values when it comes to type 5 security. Row security, the old fickle beast, row security. So again, any of my IT folks, business analysts, I'm sure at some point you've had to have come across some issues with row or type 4 row security. Basically, it controls what business unit and company related data users can see and update in the system. You can define exact MCU. That's the only alias I use. There's not millions. There's hundreds of aliases that you can use. Define exact MCU values or a range of values to grant or secure. I highlighted these in green and red. As you can see, they correspond to the green and red arrows. So this user here, it is applied at the user level. Not necessarily what we would want, but this is the example here. It's at FO901, so anytime this user goes into PO901 or anywhere where the FO901 is updated, they're going to be able to see MCU value 01284 to 01284. That is a exact value range. That means there's no in-between values, no in-between ranges that they can look at. They can only see 01284. Now, yes, there is another line of 01804. So they have 2 separate value ranges here, but that is not a exact range, excuse me. The red is our range, an actual range of values. So you can see here, user BIPOC, for the same table, FO901, they're able to see, if you do the math here, roughly 388 different, well, however many are in between this range, but 388 if there were exact numbers, MCU ranges. It can be set up either way. If there are large ranges, it's best to use the ranges because you having individual values adds to your security table and adds to the overall, again, security hierarchy check when it goes through it. So if a range of values is optimal, or if it's permitted, or if it's even feasible, then that is what is desired. Sticking with row security one more time here. Just because it is that fickle beast that I mentioned, it can either be inclusive or exclusive. Looking at my screenshot down here, inclusive says row security will allow database access for a valid range of values identified by a Y in row security application. The adverse, exclusive, will block database access for a secured range of values identified by an N. Neither one is technically wrong, as long as you're operating them in the proper way. So what I mean by that is if you're in exclusive mode, you should not have a mixed values of N's and Y's. It should be a streamlined no's across the board. And vice versa for inclusive. It should be a streamlined yes across the board, whatever or whomever or however you're granting the access in row security. It should be done with the Y's in inclusive and no's and exclusive. If no type 4 records are in the system, users inherit full access. Remember that. So remember to use your values, yeses and nos. And why is it recommended, or why is inclusive recommended? Well, it typically has less values needed. It's easier to grant what someone should have access to versus what someone shouldn't have access to majority of the time. So again, cutting down your number of records in your 950, especially as it relates to data security, that becomes a very, again, every security type it goes through the security hierarchy check every time. So once you go into the application with type 3 security, once you figure out, or the system figure out what access to give you or permissions to give you, type 1 security action, once you're in it, then it has to look at, okay, well, what data can this user see when he's in the application? So keep that at a minimum in your security workbench, and it keeps processing time and less performance strain on the system. Moving along, in our last type here is column security. I decided to add it in because it is a nice feature, and it is used widely. I'm not sure that I know, or that I have a client currently, or even in past, where they did not use some sort of column security. Well, what is column security? It allows you to restrict fields within an application, columns or fields within an application. So for instance, a user may need access to PO 1012, which is address book, but not the ability, for instance, to edit the mailing address. On my left screenshot here, I've got myself, and I entered an address in the address line 1. You can see that here, it's 123 Daffy Duck Lane. I inserted type 2 column security, either at a role or user ID. For this, I did user ID just for the sake of the presentation and exercise. And I blocked the alias, which you find out by using item help, so that when I go into address book, I'm not saying that I can't get into address book and I can't add, change, delete in there. What I'm saying is that I can't add, change, and delete a mailing address, because if you look over here, it goes straight to address line 2. Address line 1 is not even available. Now, the address is still there, and whoever's permitted or does not have that blocking value will see it. But it allows you to, and this is a very small explanation, there's all kinds of needs for sales orders, purchase orders in the accounting departments, especially around your your master data management, so your address book, customer master, and supplier master. There's a lot of people that need to get in there. There's not a lot of people that need to be changing or even looking at some of the data in there. So utilize column security to mask that. It is an added feature, and it is not hard to implement. All right, moving on. You've heard me mention the words open and closed. We're going to look at the 2 different types of security models that you can run. And it is open model versus a closed model. Before we do that, I want to talk about Star Public real quick, which ties directly into an open or closed model. It's considered a phantom role, if you will. You apply security to it, so that's kind of why it's thought of as a role, but you do not assign it to any users. So that's kind of why it's like a phantom role. And again, if you're thinking back to the original pyramid picture, it's the bottom layer of security. So users first, any of the roles assigned to the user, and nothing else is left, excuse me, it looks at Star Public. So it's the defaulted access granted. Like I mentioned, if no user or role level record is found, Star Public takes precedence. What records do we typically apply to Star Public? Star Public, Star All, at least according for the open and closed model that I'm discussing here. Star Public, Star All, type 1 and 3. So type 1 is our action, type 3 is our application, and that goes for both open versus and closed security models. We'll take a look here in a minute at the difference. We'll want our search and select applications there. There's no changing of data. There's no adding of data. There's nothing like that in a search and select. Search and selects usually end in S. I believe all of them do. And those are simply a magnifying glass in a grid, a magnifying glass in a QBE field at the top in the header. It's wherever you can open up a search box and look for the data that you're trying to look for. We're not manipulating, changing, or deleting any of that data. So those can go there. If there are any general inquiry applications, so if you've got a company-wide aspect that every user or almost every user should be able to access on an inquiry standpoint, then put it out there. Put it at Star Public. There's nothing wrong there. You can certainly create a role, but it'll count towards your role count when you apply it to a user. So if there are these types of generic inquiries, you can go ahead and put them at star public. And same goes for UBEs. So if there are generic UBEs out there that you let your user base run to get certain points of data, it doesn't allow them to update it or change it, but allows them to retrieve it, then there's no harm in that. There's no harm in putting it at star public. One thing down here in red, star public should not control security. It should dictate the bottom level, but it does not control, it should not be controlling what your users can access and cannot access. Your roles should be doing that. All right, so let's break down our open versus closed model. In an open model, you can see I got my red thumb here. It's not best practice. The star public star all setting is set to, so for type 3, it's going to have the yeses. So yes and yes for run and install. Type 1, it's going to have yes, 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 yes. So it's going to have full access in the system, which means if there is no user level record or a role that is denying access to an application or report, that user will have access to it, no matter what. Even if they can't find it on the menu, if they have fast path, if they can get to interactive versions, they get to batch version, they can run it. The other aspect is for star public star all is if there's no records at all, that is constituted as open. It isn't, JDE does not come secure by default. So just to recap real quick, you can either have all yeses for type 3 and type 1, or you can have no yes or no records at all, and you're still in an open security model. We'll talk about some more of the pros and cons, but it allows your users way too much access in the system. Unless you deny the star public star all within, or star all in each of your roles, it means you would have to say star all, run yes, no in every single role you have. Then it would almost mimic, or it would be technically, I use my air quotes here, technically a closed system. When I say technically, because you don't have this star public star all setting. These are within the role, which we don't want. So there are ways, I'm just trying to say, there are ways that you could claim, or you could say, yes, we're in a closed state, even though you do not have, or you either have these records or you do not have these, and you're operating technically an open security model. Either way, shape, or form, even if you can prove that all of your roles have the denying records, most time auditors will not accept it because it leaves too much low-hanging fruit as to when and what users can access. Looking at our closed security model, star public star all is set to type 3, run and install, no, no. And then for type 1, which is add, change, delete, okay, copy, and scroll, it is no, 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 yes, no, yes. So we still want to give them the ability to okay. So if they're going into sales orders, P4210, but yet they don't have add, change, delete, they just have inquiry, they should still be able to, if they need to, pull up a sales order, open it, and look at the details of it. If there's no okay button, they're not able to do that. And scroll. So let's say, I know plenty of clients that have tens of thousands, if not more, millions. Yeah, I do know a company or a client that has millions of inventory type records or purchase orders, those sorts of things. If they're not able to scroll to end, they're going to have some trouble. So those two things are not pertinent. They're not anyway. They cannot change data in those if they have those. So again, type 1 is no, 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 yes, no, yes. So it's basically granting them, if they can get into it, they're getting inquiry only access. And why do we use a closed model? It prevents our users from accessing anything that is outside of security at the user level or what the assigned roles dictate. It will not let them. So if they're trying to access PO411, there's nothing at the user level saying they can. There's nothing at any of the roles that are assigned to them. In an open model, they'll still be able to access PO411. In a closed model, star public will pick it up as a baseline security and it says no matter what, if your user level and your role level do not grant it, you can't access it. It shuts them down. All right, breakdown between our closed and open. What the records look like in the system. So not a lot to talk about. I just told you what they were, but we'll see it here. So again, I'm filtered on star public star all, and here our 1 is up top. This is our open model, and our run and install type 3s on the bottom. These could also be non-existent, like I mentioned. So if you go in and filter on these and there's nothing there, you know you're operating an open model. Our closed model. You can see the type 1 is no, 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 yes, no, yes, and our type 3 is no, no. So again, no user, no role level record. It goes to Star Public. Star Public shuts it down. That's what keeps your system and ultimately your company safe. Quickly, the pros and cons. So not really joking here. Open security model, couldn't think of any pros, especially from the security and compliance side of things. Cons, users have abundance of access above and beyond what they should, almost like sysadmin like access, unless like I mentioned, you've got the roles locked down, but I can assure you they still have access. Now they may not be accessing it, but in an auditor's eyes and compliance eyes, that's not what matters. Do they have the ability to? Cons, it's difficult to manage access. Users may have the potential to create fraudulent behavior without management and IT knowing. You know, you're looking at the role makeup, the roles that are assigned to the user, and you're saying, yeah, well, he doesn't have access to journal entries and all this. Well, or change inventory or sell, you know, any aspect of JD Edwards. Well, in an open model, they will, and you're not going to see it until the damage is done, because even if you're reporting on them, well, the reports would pick up that they would have access because you're in an open model. But if you're not using a third-party tool and you've built these reports and it's only looking at the roles assigned to the user in an open model, you're going to be reporting fraudulent material because the users actually have more access than that. And lastly, it's impossible or almost to adhere to the best practice and auditor standards, like I mentioned. In our closed model, skip down to the cons, I can't think of any. So we're kind of flip-flopping here. Our pros, users only have access to what is explicitly granted to him. There is no chance or no possible chance for extra access. It does follow best practice and auditor guidelines. It prevents or lessens chance anyway for fraudulent behavior from your users, intentional or not. And it's more streamlined and easier to manage access for IT and business. You're not sitting there you know, wondering or chasing your tail, figuring out why, you know, there's inventory missing or money out the door that shouldn't have been, and trying to backtrack. In a closed model, you're going to know who to go to because there's only a certain amount of users that have that access. All right, one more poll here. Brooke, if you don't mind launching it. Based on everything you have learned, it's a very generic question. Is your JDE security model open or closed? For at least the polls sake, because I know there are some, I've had clients, but who are in an open model, but have shut it down via their roles or majority of their roles. This is just talking about the Star Public, Star All settings. Are you an open or are you a closed? Now, so yes will be a closed, no will be a open. Sorry about that. Yes for closed, no for open. Should change my answers there.
Sorry, that's my fault too. I didn't even think about that.
No, no worries. No, and same thing as last time, Brooke. Once they're done, you can end it, and I think all the percentages will pop up on my screen.
Perfect. Yep, I think just one more second. We're just waiting for a couple more.
Sure. Okay, so 83% would say we're operating closed model, and 17% saying we're operating an open. So again, hopefully we're learning some stuff, some areas to look at, some process improvement areas. Those of you who are closed, we're going to get into, again, coming up, we're going to get into role model and task views and those sorts of things. So great, it's great that you're in a closed model. But how are your roles set up, and are you over granting your users access because you're using the wrong role model? And that's what we're going to get into here in a minute. But before we do that, we're going to get into the task view structure. Task view structure sets the tone in a best practice security model. What do I mean by that? I've used the process-based word a few times. So operate a process-based task view. If you operate the right task view, you have the ability in the luxury, in my opinion, to create process-based roles. We'll get into those in a minute. Only applications, so for our task view structure, only applications or reports that directly relate to that module and that process should be within that particular portion of the menu. I'll describe that down here in a minute. There's a lot going on there. And again, like I mentioned, it should tie directly into your role structure. Bullet point 2, and how the application GBE should only be in the portion of the menu that correlate to that. Let's take a look here at accounts payable. I've ventured down accounts payable, voucher entry, supplier and voucher entry, and then you can see the applications and UBEs right here. These application UBEs directly correlate to the supplier and voucher entry process. Nothing else. You don't see any inventory in here. You don't see any AR. You don't see any accounts, general accounting. It is only accounts payable, but more precisely, it's only voucher entry and supplier voucher entry methods. There are other areas on your task view, and that's fine. The task view can be robust. It should be robust. Honestly, if you're doing it right, it's going to be a fairly robust task view, but it's going to be streamlined. It's going to make perfect sense. And the users are not going to, or do not have to anyway, see the entire task view. There are ways to trim that down via your roles. We don't get into that today. There are other presentations out there, which I do suggest you watch or attend. But for this sake, our task view should match our roles. Process-based driven. So we're going to jump right into our role models, process-based versus job-based. We're going to start with job-based. Again, red thumbs down, not technically what is best practice. And we're going to get into why. Pros, they do have less role count in the system for IT and management to grant the users. So if you're not really caring about what your users have access to, as long as they can do their jobs, then hey, job-based roles is probably the model that you're on, and probably what you've been working with. And again, if you're not adhering to, or you're not forced to, or you're not caring to adhere to those segregation of duties or SOX compliance standards, then there'd be nothing wrong with job-based roles. The cons, they're heavily convoluted security within the roles, especially over time. Even at the beginning, because these roles are more job-based or driven, they've got multiple processes or multiple levels of access within them. So again, access in roles is widespread. It's typically across multiple JDE modules. With job-based roles, here comes that role sequencing thing I talked about earlier. Role sequencing issues are highly present in job-based role models in systems that I've seen across the board, whether they've had a fairly good structure of job-based roles where they weren't too convoluted, they still have sequencing issues because they're granting too much access or denying too much access within the roles. And because of job-based roles, next bullet point, you're unable to change and edit security for the roles. So, well, I take that back. You're not unable, you can, but let's say you have AP staff. So my first example down here, AP staff has 7 processes in it. So voucher entry, payments, posting, and so on. Well, let's say someone gets hired and they need to be an AP staff, but they're not going to do the posting capabilities. You only have a few options. You either have to deny that at their user level, or you have to remove it from the AP staff role. The problem with that, and the reason why I say you're unable to change or edit security within your job-based roles, is because you change that role, you're going to change the security within that role, excuse me. So removing posting capabilities, for instance, you're going to remove that for everyone who has AP staff. You're not able to remove a single process from a user when you have job-based roles. So let's move over to our process-based roles. What's the pros? Roles are not convoluted with access across multiple modules and processes. They're modular and process specific, just like our last example of voucher entry. It's easier for management and IT to control and distribute access. So basically granting roles with single process versus multiple. So back to our job-based roles, for instance, AP staff, that's one role that has 7 processes. Well, in a process-based model, you will have 7 roles assigned to the user versus 1 role. And you have the flexibility to then remove that 1 role should that time come. So companies grow, departments grow, functionalities change. Your roles shouldn't have to change. Now, obviously, if you implement new processes, then that's a whole new role. That's a whole new section on the menu. But that's different than having to change an existing role because you're having security problems or someone isn't supposed to or is supposed to have access now. You have the ability to track segregation of duties, so SOD. Job-based roles, I mean, technically you still do, I guess, but I say good luck. Conform to industry standards and best practices. Unlike job-based roles, it doesn't. Cons, you have more roles to maintain. I guess that's a con. You may have 50 roles, job-based roles. Well, when you switch or you move to a best practice standard process-based role model, you may have 175, 200. I've seen some with more than that. And you're thinking, whoa, I don't want to do that. You may think you don't want to do that, but again, back to the flexibility and the ease of maintaining and management, you get to break your business down by process. So you can grant those individual processes. You don't have to worry about, or you can easily track anyway. You don't have to worry about users having access that they shouldn't have. It's easily reported and easily fixable or mitigated. And then some examples of our roles down there. So you can see AP staff over on our left side, AP accountant, AP manager, and even CFO I've seen. Well, an example of a process-based role is 04 voucher entry. So 04 being the system code for accounts payable, and then VCHENT, you can only have 10 characters for a role or a username, being the best description you can enter for that process. So 04 voucher entry, if you're in a process-based role model, you should know what you're granting. You're not granting voucher post. You're not granting anything in general accounting. You are granting the ability for that user to go to accounts payable, supplier, and voucher entry only. All right, moving on. What can you do? So we're getting towards the end here. So everything we've learned, again, having to go at this at a high level, as you can see, we're about out of time. We got about 12 minutes left, and I'm probably going to use almost all of that time. We'll get to questions, no problem. But this is at a very high level. I could spend hours and will and have spent hours on presentations to do a deep dive. But everything we've looked at, the security types, the security hierarchy, the role-based, the open versus, the process-based roles versus the job-based roles, the open versus closed models, we should have a little bit, or at least a little bit, of a better understanding of how security works and what the different types of models that we're in. What can you do? What can you do to conform to compliance? If you have answered yes or found that anything discussed today correlates to how your security is set up and you are not in compliance with industry standards, you don't have to hit the panic button just yet. You can and should do the following. Analyze the security aspects where you believe you are not in compliance. If you're not sure what to do, reach out, do some research, do what you need to do to look into those things. Present that to whomever it needs to be presented to. Develop a plan to remediate any known or found compliance issues. Initiate remediation plan while still running production business. We'll talk about that in a minute. You can remediate, you can change, you can flip, if you will, your security while still running your production business. And lastly, threw it in there because, well, why wouldn't you want to call the experts? But call GSI to help. Even if you know how to look at some of those other things, or if you don't, we can do that part. We can help, and we can help implement the plan, or we can help devise a plan. And if you have, security savvy folks, then they can run with it. But having a second set of eyes, especially ones that are in the industry and who are experts, is never a bad thing. So before we get to our questions or anything, let's take a little bit closer look at what plans are out there to remediate. So if you're having an open versus closed compliance issue, there's ways, like I mentioned, you can still flip your security from open to closed and run business. It's not a downtime. This is not a, we need to close business for a month, couple weeks, months, extra. You use the public role. I know that might be confusing with Star Public, but this is public, and this one actually is a role. So you create and use public role to imitate a closed system. Public, again, is not star public. It is a role that is assigned to a user. What goes in this public role? You create records, again, to mimic a closed system. So what we learned earlier, we would enter these types of records. I put type 5 in here because you can have that at star public or public, but these two would absolutely have to be in there, the type 3 and type 1. Type 3 would be your no, run and install. No, you cannot click on that application unless a role or a record at the user level allows you to. And then type 1 says no, yes, meaning if you're able to get into that, but there's no type 1 record anywhere else in your user level or role level makeup, you're going to inherit inquiry access only. Only assign that public role to the testing environment, DB, PY, and TR. Assigning PD will create the closed environment in production and cause production issues and or delays. So that's where the kicker comes in. We can control, even though we have one security table, we are able to control security by environments via the role and the environments assigned to that role. So we create this public role, we insert our type 3 and type 1, and we grant it DB, PY, and TR, or whatever your testing environment is, or environments are. And that means when they sign into production, public, this role public one is assigned to them, it doesn't pick up security for it because they're in production. That role does not have production access. Therefore, we basically, again, air quote, we're tricking the system, if you will, to use different security in different environments. If functional roles, so process-based or your job-based roles, the roles that grant functionality in the system are set up correctly, your users should really not notice any difference in access. They just won't have the extra functionality from behind the scenes or inherited access, if you will. Yeah, access not defined via roles or at the user level. So if you are having issues with open and closed compliance, it's not quite as easy as this, and I don't recommend just doing it, on the whim, but there is a way to solve these issues, either over time or bang, 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 right back to back, using the public role. Our other main issue when it comes to models is our process-based versus job-based. What can you do to conform? Basically, begin by breaking down your unique self-sustaining business processes. Again, voucher entry, voucher matching, voucher payment, voucher post, those are all self-sustaining processes. Create new roles that only have access in the process it defines, to the process it defines. So again, voucher entry should only have voucher entry. 04 voucher match should only have voucher matching applications and UVs, should not have anything else. Create and assign security for only the applications and UVs, like I mentioned, for each of the self-sustaining business process roles. Assign the testing environments only. So again, we are creating these new roles. So we've got public, that's going to act as our open close. And then we've got these new process-based roles, and they have DB, PY, TR, or whatever your training environments are. Assign these roles to your users and have them test. So basically go through a UAT, a user acceptance testing. When they log into DB, PY, or TR, and not DB, or excuse me, PD, they'll be basically in a testing scenario, a testing environment. And you haven't done anything else. You haven't had to change, mapping new tables, new OCMs, do any of that sort, new environments. You're allowing them to test functionality in your current system. And you're also allowing you to fix your issues, your compliance issues in your current system. And then once confirmed, assign PD environment to your new roles. You're ready for use. You're ready for go live. So again, I make that sound easy here. It's not quite as easy, but high level, this is what is involved. Now, obviously the nitty gritty, the hands to keyboard type stuff, sure, that gets more involved, but this is our high level take and our process behind becoming compliant when it comes to open versus closed and process versus job-based models. All right, I'm going to just quickly, I'm not going to go back over these. I'm going to quickly just kind of recap what we talked about, and then we're going to get to some questions and answers. We're coming up on the top of the hour. So we did look at some of the main industry security best practices anyway. There are more, but these are the highest concern. We defined some of the security, we defined security, the security hierarchy, the user level, then role level, then star public. Our security types are 3, 1, 5, 4, and 2. So application 3, action type 1, process and data selection, processing options and data selection type 5, row security type 4, and column security type 2. We looked at security models, open versus closed, task view structure, so following our process-based structure, our role model, so process-based versus job-based, and then we looked at some things you can do to remediate or begin looking into anyway, remediating any compliance issues. So evaluate your system based on talking points today, take action where necessary and possible, and then obviously, again, let the experts lead the way if it's too cumbersome, or if the knowledge base is not there. There's nothing wrong in reaching out to the experts in either us guiding the way or taking control and leading the way the whole time. So give us a call. All right, Brooke, I believe, oh, there is that. I don't know.
And I was going to say, Kyle, like, let's just go right into the questions.
Okay.
And so if you want, after, you can go over this and then we'll go right into the questions.
Sure. Brooke, if you don't mind reading those to me,
Okay, did you want to go over this right here?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you said questions first. No problem. So yeah, let me get through this first. So as being a part of this webinar, we want to help, and we want to strive for new relationships, and we love being able to take what can be, from a security standpoint, a miserable time to a success story. So if there's any way we can help do that by, providing you a full JDE security assessment, then being part of this webinar will get you a 50% off. It's a great deal. Worst case scenario, it tells you where you are. If you have auditors to report to, if you have upper management breathing down your neck, trying to get these things done, we can get this done. We can do it, and it comes in, a good deliverable that's feasible for, like I said, auditors, and obviously upper management. And then if there's any remediation work that needs to come out of that, 15% off consultant fees. I know that's quite a bit when you look down at the hourly rates of some of the project work. So again, if there's anything we can do to help, I hope that you're interested, you take full advantage. Worst case scenario, reach out with some questions. I'll be glad to answer them and help you. Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and jump into our question and answer portion of the webcast, just to get some of your questions answered. Kyle, we have a couple questions here. We might only have time to get through a few of them, but I can send the rest to you later. So our first question is from Larry, and he says, how often should security setup be reviewed?
How often should security setup be reviewed? Well, it's a broad question, but at minimum every 6 months, minimum. It depends, but it also depends on how many changes you have. If you're and it depends on what your model currently is. So if you're in a sustainable model, if you're in a process space, you're closed, you don't have a lot of security changes going on, then I would monitor via your user access. The model should be sustainable going forward. If you're having a lot of security issues, you're having a lot of sequencing and those types of issues, I would say security should be bumped up to reviewed probably quarterly at a minimum. So it just depends on the business case, the amount of issues and security requests you have coming, and what types of requests those are.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And I've got, we can hit one more here, I think. And the next question is from Amber. And Amber said, what is the typical length of time to fix a generic security issue?
Fix a generic security issue. Again, it depends, but if we're talking about an open versus closed and or a process first, basically anything we discussed today versus just a role sequencing type issue, if you're trying to flip your security, if you will, then from a project standpoint, anywhere from a month to, again, depending on how you do business, could be 6 months. It depends on how intricate the business is, the business requirements. We have to go through user testing. We don't want to just design this stuff and throw it out to a go live. Certainly we can, or you could, but obviously then you're going to be dealing with production issues versus dealing with the issues in testing and getting all those streamlined, straightened out for our go live. So if you're talking about what we discussed today versus just a regular security issue that comes into your business from a user, then it is involved. Like I said, it's not just cut and dry, like I mentioned, the high level standpoint, but it is it's more involved. So I would say anywhere from a month to potentially 6 months.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And I think we're just a little bit over our time. So I think that's all the time we have for today. We want to thank you, Kyle, for your presentation, and everybody for attending today. And when you finish, there's going to be a survey that will be sent to you if you guys can take that. And again, we thank you and we hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Brooke, and thanks everyone for joining. Like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Take care.
Thanks.